Drink it, Grace, Daniel said, sliding the glass of red wine toward her. Grace's hands trembled. Why are you watching me like that? Daniel forced a smile. Because tonight, everything changes. Grace stared at the wine, her heart pounding. 12 years of marriage, and suddenly her husband felt like a stranger. What did you put in it? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer. Fans, if you love emotional stories full of betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, like this video, share with your friends, comment where you're watching from, subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Now, let's begin. The glass between them. Drink it. Daniel's voice was calm, almost gentle, but his hand did not move away from the glass. Grace stared at the deep red wine inside it. The liquid shimmered under the chandelier, reflecting fractured light onto the white marble table. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. I said I'm not thirsty, she replied quietly. Daniel smiled. It was the same smile he used in public, the charming smile that had built his reputation, the smile that had convinced investors, partners, and her. But tonight, it felt like a stranger's smile. You've always loved this one, he said. Cabernet Sauvignon. Our anniversary wine. Grace swallowed. Our anniversary was 3 weeks ago. Daniel paused. Only for a second. Then he chuckled lightly, as if the correction meant nothing. Then consider it a late celebration. The air between them grew heavy. Outside, rain struck the tall glass windows of their Lecky mansion, each drop tapping like impatient fingers. Grace studied his face. His jaw was tight. His eyes avoided hers for a fraction too long. And suddenly, she knew. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to feel fear bloom quietly in her chest. She pushed the glass slightly away. I'll drink it later. Daniel's hand shot forward and stopped it. The sound of his palm hitting the table echoed through the silent dining room. No, he said softly. Grace froze. He leaned closer. Drink it now. Her heart began to pound. Daniel, you're scaring me. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Regret or guilt. But it vanished just as quickly. You don't trust me? He asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Grace let out a small, broken laugh. I trusted you when we had nothing, she said, when we lived in that one-room apartment with leaking ceilings. Daniel said nothing. I trusted you when I sold my mother's land so you could start your company, she continued, when everyone said you would fail. His fingers curled slowly into a fist. And I trusted you, she whispered, when you promised nothing would ever come between us. Silence. Rain. Breathing. Daniel looked at the glass. Then prove it, he said. Grace stared at him. Her husband, her partner of 12 years, the man she had built everything with. He would not meet her eyes. Her stomach twisted. Why? She asked quietly. Daniel exhaled sharply. It's just wine, Grace? No, she said. Her voice was stronger now. It's not. Something inside her had begun to wake up. A quiet instinct. A warning. She pushed her chair back slightly. Daniel stood immediately. The chair legs screeched loudly against the marble floor. Sit down. Grace's heart slammed harder. I'm going to bed. You're not leaving. She looked at him in disbelief. Move, Daniel. He stepped in front of her, not touching her, just blocking her path. Rain thundered louder outside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then his phone buzzed. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Daniel hesitated. Grace noticed. He slowly pulled the phone from his pocket. The screen lit his face. Grace saw his expression change. Fear. Real fear. He turned the phone away quickly. Too late. Grace had already seen the name, Vanessa. Her breath caught. Who is Vanessa? She asked. Daniel didn't answer. Daniel. Still nothing. The phone buzzed again. Grace reached for it. Daniel pulled it back instantly. That was all the confirmation she needed. The room spun. How long? She asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. It's not what you think. Grace laughed weakly. That's what men always say. Grace, how long? She repeated. He hesitated. That hesitation shattered something inside her. 12 years, reduced to silence. 8 months, he admitted. The words hit her like a physical blow. Grace stepped back. 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of sharing her bed. 8 months of pretending. Her throat burned. Does she come here? She asked quietly. No, he answered too quickly. Grace nodded slowly. I see. Daniel stepped closer. It didn't mean anything. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man she thought she knew better than herself. It meant enough to destroy us. Rain poured harder, as if the sky itself was breaking. Daniel gestured toward the wine. This has nothing to do with that. Grace's eyes snapped to the glass. Cold dread crept into her veins. Then why are you forcing me to drink it? He didn't answer. And that silence terrified her. She moved suddenly, trying to step around him. Daniel grabbed her wrist, not hard, but firm enough to stop her. Grace stared at his hand, then slowly at his face. Let go of me. He released her immediately. They stood there, breathing heavily, strangers wearing familiar faces. Daniel's voice softened. Grace, please, just drink it. Her heart sank. He was desperate. Desperation meant danger. She stepped backward again. Her hip hit the edge of the table. The wine glass trembled. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Grace knocked the glass over. Red wine spilled across the white marble, spreading like blood. Daniel's eyes widened. No. He rushed forward instinctively. Grace froze. Why would spilled wine matter that much? He grabbed a napkin quickly, wiping it frantically, too frantically. Grace felt ice spread through her body. Her voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? Daniel stopped, slowly. He looked up at her, his face pale. Neither of them spoke, but in that silence, Grace understood. What did you do? For the first time since she met him, Grace's voice barely was afraid of her Daniel husband. Stared at her, frozen, the white napkin clenched tightly in his hand. The red stain had already spread across it, blooming like a wound. Nothing, he said quickly. Too quickly. Grace's chest tightened. You're lying. I'm not. You are. The rain outside crashed harder, wind rattling the tall windows like something trying to get inside. Grace's eyes dropped to the spilled wine. It dripped slowly from the table's edge onto the marble floor. Drop, drop, drop. Each sound echoed loudly in her ears. Daniel threw the napkin down. It's just wine, Grace. You're overreacting. She looked up at him, disbelief filling her face. Overreacting? She repeated softly. Her voice began to shake. You forced me to drink it. I didn't force you. You blocked the door. His jaw tightened. Silence. Grace wrapped her arms around herself. I saw her name, she said. Vanessa. Daniel looked away. That hurt more than anything. How long have you been planning this? She asked. He snapped his head toward her. Planning what? Her eyes fell again to the wine. That. Daniel laughed suddenly. Short. Cold. You think I poisoned you? Grace said nothing. He stepped closer. You think I would kill my own wife? She held his gaze. I don't know who you are anymore. The words landed heavily between them. Daniel's expression hardened. You're being dramatic. Grace felt something inside her break. Dramatic. After 12 years, after sacrifice, after loyalty. She turned away from him. I'm leaving. Daniel's voice rose. No. She stopped walking, slowly turned back. No, she repeated. You're not going anywhere tonight. Fear crept up her spine. You don't get to decide that. This is our house. Our house? She said bitterly. Or the house you share with your mistress in secret? His eyes flashed. That's enough. Grace moved toward the hallway. Daniel stepped in front of her again, this time closer. Too close. Move, she whispered. No. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it. Daniel? His voice dropped. If you walk out that door, don't come back. The threat hung in the air. Grace stared at him. For years, she had feared losing him. Now, she feared staying. You already left, she said quietly. His expression flickered. She stepped around him before he could react. Her feet moved quickly across the marble floor, her breathing shallow. Behind her, Grace! She didn't stop. She reached the staircase and hurried up, her legs trembling. Her bedroom door slammed behind her. Her hands shook as she locked it. Click. The sound gave her a small, fragile sense of safety. She leaned against the door, listening. Footsteps below. Pacing. Then silence. Grace exhaled slowly. Her eyes scanned the room. Everything looked normal. Their wedding photo stood on the dresser. Daniel smiling. Her smiling. Two people who believed in forever. Her vision blurred with tears. Her phone lay on the bedside table. She grabbed it quickly. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Who could she call? Her parents were gone. Her closest friend lived abroad. She had no one nearby. Except her eyes widened slightly. Ada. Daniel's younger sister. Ada had always loved her like family. Grace dialed the number. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then Auntie Grace? Grace nearly collapsed in relief at the familiar voice. Ada, you sound strange. Are you okay? Grace hesitated. Her voice cracked. I need help. Silence. What happened? Grace swallowed. I think Daniel is trying to hurt me. Ada inhaled sharply. What? I'm not sure, Grace said quickly, but something is wrong. He forced me to drink wine. He wouldn't let me leave. Ada's voice turned serious. Listen to me carefully. Are you safe right now? I locked the bedroom door. Good, stay there. Grace nodded, even though Ada couldn't see her. I'm coming. Grace's heart skipped. No, it's late. I don't care. Grace hesitated. Daniel was still downstairs. If he saw Ada, everything would explode. Just stay on the phone with me, Grace whispered. Ada agreed. Minutes passed. Grace sat on the bed, phone pressed to her ear, listening to Ada's steady breathing. Then, footsteps. Outside the bedroom door. Grace froze. Ada heard it too. Grace, is that him? Ada whispered. Yes. The handle moved slightly. Grace's heart stopped. Daniel's voice came through the door, soft, controlled. Grace, she didn't answer. Open the door. Her throat tightened. I just want to talk. She remained silent. The handle rattled again. Grace, his tone sharpened. Open the door. Her fingers dug into the bedsheet. Ada whispered urgently, don't open it. Grace stayed still. Seconds passed. Then Daniel sighed. His footsteps retreated. Grace exhaled shakily. Ada spoke softly. I'm on my way. Grace closed her eyes. Please hurry. The call ended. Silence returned. Heavy. Unbearable. Grace stood slowly and walked toward the dresser. Her eyes fell on something she hadn't noticed before. A small brown envelope. Her name was written on it, in Daniel's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Inside, documents. She pulled them out. Her eyes scanned the first page. Her breath vanished. Life insurance policy. Policyholder Grace Okafor. Beneficiary Daniel Okafor. Coverage amount $450,000. Grace's knees nearly gave out. Her hands shook violently as she turned the page. The date. It had been signed 2 weeks ago. Her signature was there. But she didn't remember signing anything like this. Her chest tightened. Then she saw it. At the bottom. A second beneficiary name had been recently added, Vanessa Cole. Grace dropped the papers. Her entire body went cold. This wasn't fear anymore. This was truth. Downstairs, a door slammed. Grace flinched violently. Was he leaving or coming back? Her survival instinct screamed. She grabbed her handbag quickly, stuffed the documents inside, moved toward the window. Rain poured heavily outside, but she didn't care. She opened the bedroom door slowly. Silence. No footsteps. No voice. She stepped into the hallway carefully, every movement cautious, every breath shallow. She reached the staircase, looked down. The living room was empty, but the spilled wine stain was still there. Dark, visible. Waiting. Grace didn't stop. She ran. Out the front door, into the storm, barefoot, heart pounding, not knowing where she would go, only knowing she could not stay. Behind her, inside the house, Daniel stood in the shadows at the top of the stairs, watching her disappear. His face empty, his voice barely a whisper. It was supposed to be simple. Rain soaked Grace's hair, her clothes clinging heavily to her skin as she ran down the quiet street. Her bare feet slapped against the cold pavement, each step driven by fear. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her chest burned, her lungs screaming for air, but she kept moving until the mansion was no longer visible. Only then did she stop. Her hands trembled as she reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls. All from Daniel. Her heart dropped. A new call began immediately. His name lit up the screen. Daniel calling. Grace stared at it, frozen. The phone buzzed endlessly in her hand. Finally, it stopped. A message appeared seconds later. Daniel. Grace, where are you? Another message. You're overreacting. Come home. Then another. We need to talk. Grace let out a hollow laugh. Talk? After forcing her to drink poisoned wine? After secretly insuring her life? After adding his mistress as beneficiary? Her fingers moved quickly. She turned the phone off. Complete silence followed. For the first time in 12 years, Daniel could not reach her. And that terrified him. Across the city, inside the dark mansion, Daniel stood in the living room, staring at his phone. Her location was gone, her calls unreachable, her presence erased. He clenched his jaw. She shouldn't have seen it, he muttered. The life insurance papers were still upstairs. He had been careless. Vanessa had warned him. His phone vibrated, as if summoned by his thoughts. Vanessa calling. He answered immediately. Her voice came sharp and impatient. Well? Daniel ran a hand over his face. She knows. Silence. Then, what do you mean she knows? Vanessa demanded. She found the documents. Vanessa cursed under her breath. I told you to hide them properly. I did. Clearly not well enough. Daniel's voice hardened. She ran. Vanessa paused. Ran where? I don't know. That answer made her angrier. You let her leave? What was I supposed to do? Lock her inside? Yes, Vanessa snapped. Do you understand what's at stake? Daniel's chest tightened. Of course he understood. The debts, the pressure, the threats from investors, the empire he had built was collapsing. Grace's insurance money had been the only solution. Vanessa's voice lowered. You said she trusted you. She did. Vanessa scoffed. Not anymore. Daniel looked at the red stain still visible on the marble floor. It had begun to dry. She'll come back, he said quietly. Vanessa didn't sound convinced. And if she doesn't? Daniel didn't answer. Vanessa spoke slowly. You know what happens if this fails? Yes. He knew. He had borrowed money from dangerous people, people who did not accept excuses. Grace had been his way out. Vanessa had been his plan. Now everything was slipping. Find her, Vanessa said coldly. The line went dead. Grace stood under the small roof of a closed shop, shivering violently. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights cutting through the rain. She hugged herself tightly. Her mind replayed everything. The wine, the insurance. Vanessa, her husband's desperation. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand. She flinched. She had turned it off. Slowly, she pressed the power button. The screen lit up again. A new message appeared. Not from Daniel, from Ada. Ada, I'm outside your house. Where are you? Grace quickly typed. Grace, I left. The reply came instantly. Why? Grace hesitated. How could she explain something this monstrous? Grace, he tried to make me drink something. Ada, he insured my life. There was a long pause. Then, where are you? Send me your location now. Grace looked around. A street sign stood nearby. She sent it. Ada replied. Stay there. I'm coming. Why? Grace leaned against the wall, her body trembling. For the first time since she ran, she felt a small sense of hope. 40 minutes later, headlights slowed in front of her. A familiar car door opened. Auntie Grace. Ada ran toward her, umbrella forgotten. Grace nearly collapsed into her arms. Ada held her tightly. You're freezing. Grace couldn't speak. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Ada guided her into the car quickly. The heater blasted warm air. Grace stared ahead blankly. Ada watched her carefully. What happened? Grace reached into her bag and handed her the documents. Ada's eyes scanned them. Her face changed. Shock, then horror, then anger. This is insane, Ada whispered. She turned to Grace. Did you sign this? No. Ada's jaw tightened. That means he forged it. Grace closed her eyes. I think he was going to kill me. Saying the words aloud made them real. Ada gripped the steering wheel tightly. I don't understand, she said. Daniel loves you. Grace laughed weakly. I thought so, hesitated. There's something else. Grace looked at her. Ada seemed reluctant. What? Ada exhaled slowly. I've seen Vanessa before. Grace's heart skipped. Where? Ada swallowed. At Daniel's office. Grace's chest tightened painfully. She's not just his mistress. Ada hesitated again. She's his business partner. Grace stared at her. What? Ada nodded. Deschray. She joined the company about a year ago. Quietly. Daniel said she was an investor. Grace's mind spun. Investor. Mistress. Beneficiary. This was bigger than betrayal. This was conspiracy. Grace whispered, She helped him plan it. Ada didn't deny it. The rain softened outside, but inside the car, a storm had just begun. Grace turned her head slowly toward Ada. Her eyes no longer filled with fear. They filled with something else, something harder, colder. If he wants me dead, Grace said quietly, then he'll have to watch me live. Ada stared at her. Grace's voice became steady. I trusted him once. Her fingers curled tightly around the insurance papers. I won't make that mistake again. Far across the city, Daniel stood alone in the dark mansion, waiting, hoping. Not knowing, Grace had just become the most dangerous person in his life. Ada's apartment was small, too small for the kind of life Grace had been living. The ceiling fan creaked softly as it turned, pushing warm air around the dim room. The scent of detergent and old books filled the space. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in one of Ada's oversized sweaters. Her wet clothes lay in a bucket near the bathroom door. She stared at nothing. Ada returned from the kitchen holding a steaming mug. Drink this, she said gently. Grace accepted it with trembling hands. Thank you. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Grace asked quietly, how long has she been working with him? Ada leaned against the wall. About a year. Grace frowned. That was when Daniel started traveling more. Ada nodded slowly. Yes. Grace remembered those nights, the sudden business trips, the late meetings, the distant attitude. She had believed every excuse because she trusted him. Her chest tightened painfully. Ada hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else you should know." Grace looked up. "What?" Ada crossed her arms. "The company, it hasn't been doing well." Grace blinked. "That's impossible." Daniel's company, Okafor Holdings, was successful, or at least that's what he had told her. Ada shook her head. "I overheard him arguing on the phone last month. He sounded desperate." Grace's stomach dropped. "He told me they were expanding." Ada gave a sad smile. "That's what he told everyone." Grace's mind raced. Expansion, investor, insurance, mistress. The pieces were beginning to connect in a way she didn't want to accept. "He needed money," Grace whispered. Ada nodded. "Yes." Grace looked down at her hands. The same hands that had once counted coins to help Daniel print his first business flyers. The same hands that had signed documents without reading them because she trusted him completely. "What if," Grace said slowly, "everything was a lie?" Ada didn't answer, because they both feared the truth. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his home office. The room was dark except for the faint glow of his laptop screen. Numbers filled the display. Red numbers, losses, debt. Final warnings. His phone lay beside him. Still no message from Grace. He slammed the laptop shut. His breathing grew heavier. He stood suddenly and walked toward the cabinet. Inside, rows of expensive wine bottles, untouched. He grabbed one angrily and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall. Glass and dark liquid spilled everywhere. Daniel pressed his hands against the desk, his shoulders shaking. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. Footsteps echoed faintly in his memory. Grace's laughter, her voice, her belief in him. He clenched his fists. He had built everything from nothing. He had earned his success. Hadn't he? His phone buzzed. He grabbed it instantly. "Vanessa," he answered. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Have you found her?" "No." Vanessa exhaled slowly. "That's a problem." Daniel's temper flared. "You think I don't know that?" "You're losing control," she replied coldly. Daniel said nothing. Vanessa continued. "You told me she wouldn't suspect anything. She wasn't supposed to." Vanessa's voice hardened. "Now she knows about the insurance." Daniel swallowed. "Yes." "And if she goes to the police?" His chest tightened. "Forgery, attempted murder, fraud. Everything would collapse." Vanessa spoke again. "You need to fix this." Daniel's voice dropped. "How?" There was a pause. "Then bring her back," Vanessa said. "Convince her." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "She ran barefoot into the rain. She's not coming back." Vanessa's tone turned dangerous. "Then make sure she can't talk." The words chilled him. Even he hadn't gone that far in his mind. Not yet. He ended the call without replying, but the thought remained. Heavy. Poisonous. Morning came slowly. Grace hadn't slept. She sat by Ada's window, watching the pale sunrise creep over Lagos. Her entire life had changed in one night. Ada walked in quietly. "You should rest." Grace shook her head. "I can't." Ada hesitated. "What will you do?" Will you do?" Grace didn't answer immediately. She watched the city awaken, people walking, cars moving, life continuing as if nothing had happened. Finally, she spoke. "I want the truth." Ada nodded. "How?" Grace turned to her. "I'm going to his office." Ada's eyes widened. "No, that's dangerous. I won't let him see me." Grace's voice was calm now, stronger. "I helped him build that company. I know places he doesn't remember." Ada hesitated. Grace reached for the insurance papers beside her. "He tried to erase me," she said quietly. Her grip tightened. "But I'm still here." Ada studied her face. The fear was still there, but something else had replaced her helplessness. Resolve. "When?" Ada asked. Grace stood slowly. "Today." Later that afternoon, Grace stood across the street from Okafor Holdings. The tall glass building reflected the bright sky. Employees moved in and out of the entrance. None of them knew the truth. Grace adjusted her sunglasses. Her heart pounded violently. This building had once made her proud. Now it made her sick. Ada stood beside her. "You don't have to do this," Grace nodded. "Yes, I do." She stepped forward. Every step carried memories. Hope. Sacrifice. Love. Lies. They entered the building quietly. The receptionist looked up. "Good afternoon." Grace forced a polite smile. "Good afternoon." The woman didn't recognize her. Grace felt a strange emptiness at that. She had once been here every day. Now, she was a stranger. They walked toward the elevator. Grace pressed the button. Her reflection stared back at her in the metal doors, tired, hurt, but alive. The elevator opened. They stepped inside. The doors slid shut. As it rose, Grace's pulse quickened, each floor bringing her closer to the truth. The doors opened to Daniel's company floor. The office buzzed with quiet activity, staff typing, phones ringing, normal. Grace walked slowly down the hallway. Her eyes scanned everything. Then, she saw it, through the glass wall of Daniel's office. A woman stood inside, tall, elegant, confident. Vanessa. Grace stopped breathing. Vanessa was standing behind Daniel's desk, not beside it, behind it, as if it belonged to her. And then, Vanessa picked up a framed photo, Grace's photo, her wedding picture. Vanessa stared at it for a moment, then calmly placed it face down on the desk. Grace's heart shattered silently. Beside her, Ada whispered in horror, "She's replacing you." Grace didn't move. She couldn't, because in that moment, she realized something far worse than betrayal. Daniel hadn't just planned to end her life. He had already begun erasing her from it. Grace's fingers curled tightly at her sides as she stared through the glass wall. Vanessa stood behind Daniel's desk like she belonged there, like Grace had never existed. Ada touched Grace's arm gently. "We should go," she whispered. But Grace couldn't move. Her entire life was inside that office. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered when Daniel had nothing. And now, another woman stood in her place. Vanessa reached for Daniel's chair and sat down slowly, crossing her legs with quiet confidence. She picked up a document and began reading it calmly. Grace's stomach twisted. "She's acting like she owns it," Ada said under her breath. Grace's voice was barely audible. "Maybe she does." Before Ada could respond, footsteps approached down the hallway. Grace reacted instantly. She grabbed Ada's wrist and pulled her behind a nearby storage door. They slipped inside just as two male voices passed. Grace recognized one immediately. Daniel. Her heart slammed violently. She leaned closer to the small crack in the door. Daniel and another man stopped near the office entrance. The other man spoke first. "Are you sure this is wise?" Daniel sounded tired. "I don't have a choice." Grace's chest tightened. The man lowered his voice. "If your wife finds out—" "She won't," Daniel interrupted sharply. Grace's hands began to tremble. The man hesitated. "You transferred the majority shares already." Grace froze. "Shares? Transferred?" Daniel sighed. "Yes." The man continued. "To Vanessa." Grace's breath caught painfully in her throat. Ada's eyes widened beside her. Daniel spoke again. "It was temporary." Temporary. The word echoed bitterly in Grace's mind. The man didn't sound convinced. "Temporary decisions can become permanent mistakes." Daniel said nothing. The man continued carefully. "You built this company." Grace felt something twist inside her. Built. No, they had built it. Together. Daniel finally spoke. "I did what I had to do to keep it alive." Grace's jaw tightened. "At what cost?" The man sighed. "And your wife?" Daniel's silence lasted too long. Finally, "She wouldn't understand." Grace closed her eyes. Pain stabbed through her chest. After everything, he still saw her as someone outside his world. The man spoke again. "If she contests ownership, things could get messy." Daniel laughed quietly, cold. "She can't contest anything." Grace frowned. Why would he say that? Then, Daniel added softly, "Her name was never on it." Grace's entire body went numb. Ada looked at her in shock. Grace shook her head slowly. No, that couldn't be true. She had signed documents. She had invested her inheritance. She had helped him from the very beginning. Daniel's voice continued, "Legally, it's mine." Grace felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. Every memory now felt like a lie. The man nodded slowly. "And Vanessa, she owns 51% now." Grace's heart stopped. Majority control. Vanessa owned his company. Not him. Not Grace. Vanessa. Footsteps moved again. Daniel walked into his office. Vanessa stood as he entered. Grace watched through the narrow crack. Vanessa smiled faintly. "You look terrible," she said. Daniel ignored the comment. "Did anyone ask about me?" "No." She studied his face. "You didn't find her." It wasn't a question. Daniel shook his head. Vanessa crossed her arms. "That's dangerous." Daniel's patience snapped. "I know that." Vanessa stepped closer. "If she talks, everything collapses." Grace's heart pounded louder. Daniel whispered, "She won't." Vanessa tilted her head. "You sound unsure." Daniel didn't respond. Vanessa's voice softened slightly. "You said the wine would solve the problem." Grace's blood ran cold. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "She didn't drink it." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "That was your one job." Grace felt Ada grip her arm tightly. Vanessa lowered her voice. You understand what happens if you fail, Daniel. Daniel looked away. Grace saw it clearly now. Fear. Real fear. Vanessa wasn't just his partner. She had power over him. Vanessa leaned closer. Without me, your company dies. Grace's mind raced. Without Vanessa, everything ends. Daniel spoke quietly. I know. Vanessa's eyes hardened. And without that insurance money, your debts remain. Grace felt sick. It was true. All of it. Vanessa glanced toward the window. For your sake, I hope she doesn't become a problem. Grace's breathing became shallow. Ada leaned close to her ear. We need to leave now. Grace nodded slowly. They slipped out of the storage room silently and moved toward the elevator. Every step felt unreal. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. The doors closed. Grace stared at her reflection again. She barely recognized herself. Ada spoke carefully. You heard everything. Grace nodded faintly. Yes. Ada hesitated. What will you do? Grace didn't answer immediately. Her mind replayed Daniel's words. Her name was never on it. 12 years. Erased with one sentence. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Grace stepped out slowly. She stopped just before the exit. Her voice came out low. He thinks I have nothing. Ada looked at her. Grace turned slightly, her eyes steady now. But he's wrong. Ada frowned. What do you mean? Grace reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She opened her email, scrolled, stopped, then turned the screen toward Ada. Ada's eyes widened. It was an old document, very old, from the very beginning of the company, original incorporation papers. And on that document, 2 names were listed, Daniel Okafor, Grace Okafor. Ada gasped. He lied. Grace nodded slowly. Her voice was calm, but beneath it burned something dangerous. He didn't just betray me. She looked back toward the tall building behind them. He stole from me. The wind blew softly across her face. Grace held the phone tightly. For the first time since that night, she wasn't running. She was planning. And Daniel had no idea. The woman he tried to erase still held the one truth that could destroy him. Grace and Ada stepped out into the late afternoon heat. The sun hung low over Lagos, casting long shadows across the busy street. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and life moved on like nothing had changed. But Grace's world had already burned. She tightened her grip on her phone. Ada looked at her carefully. What now? Grace stared at the Okafor Holdings building behind them. He thinks the company belongs to him, she said quietly. He thinks Vanessa owns everything. Ada crossed her arms. But you have proof. Grace nodded slowly. The original registration papers. Ada's eyes filled with cautious hope. Then you can fight. Before Grace could respond, her phone vibrated in her hand. An unknown number. She froze. Ada noticed immediately. Who is it? Grace shook her head slightly. I don't know. The phone continued vibrating. Her heart pounded harder with every second. Finally, she answered cautiously. Hello? For a moment, there was only breathing. Then a male voice spoke, low, nervous. Madam Grace? Her chest tightened. Yes. Who is this? It's Emeka. Grace frowned. Emeka. Daniel's accountant. She remembered him clearly. Quiet, loyal, always respectful. Why are you calling me? She asked carefully. He lowered his voice further. I can't talk long. Grace's stomach twisted. Talk about what? There was a pause. Then, you're not safe. Her heart stopped. Ada stared at her, alarmed. Grace turned slightly away. What do you mean? Emeka exhaled shakily. I overheard something last night. Grace's pulse quickened. Overheard what? Emeka hesitated. Madam, that wine. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Yes? It wasn't the only plan. Grace felt cold spread through her entire body. What are you saying? Emeka spoke quickly now, fear evident in his voice. Sir Daniel has been under pressure, serious pressure. Investors, loans, people who want their money back. Grace remembered Vanessa's words. Without that insurance money, your debts remain. Emeka continued. He borrowed far more than the company can repay. Grace swallowed. How much? Emeka whispered the number. Grace nearly dropped the phone. It was enough to destroy everything. Ada leaned closer. What is it? Grace couldn't speak yet. Emeka continued urgently. When he took that life insurance policy, it wasn't just protection. Grace closed her eyes. It was the repayment plan. The words hit like a hammer. Her death was currency. Emeka's voice trembled, and Madam Vanessa was the one who arranged it. Grace's breathing became shallow. I saw the emails. She connected him to the insurance agent. Ada covered her mouth in horror. Grace forced herself to stay calm. Why are you telling me this? Emeka hesitated. Because you were always kind to me. Grace felt tears burn behind her eyes. You paid my hospital bills when my son was sick, he said quietly. Sir never knew. Grace remembered. It had been years ago. She never mentioned it again. Emeka continued, I can't watch them destroy you. Grace whispered, Destroy me? His voice dropped even lower. They're already preparing documents to declare you mentally unstable. Grace's entire body went rigid. What? If they prove you're unstable, they control your assets and your testimony loses value. Grace felt dizzy. This wasn't just betrayal. This was annihilation. Her identity. Her voice. Her existence. All being erased. Emeka spoke urgently. You must be careful. They know you ran. Grace's heart slammed violently. How? I heard Sir Daniel tell Vanessa he tracked your phone before it went off. Grace's eyes widened. Tracking, Ada whispered. Turn it off. Grace immediately powered down the phone. Emeka's voice disappeared mid-sentence. Silence returned. Grace stared at the blank screen. Her reflection looked back at her. Broken, but not defeated. Ada spoke softly. They're trying to erase you completely. Grace nodded slowly. Yes. Her mind raced. Insurance. Forgery. Ownership theft. False insanity claims. Poison. Every exit closed. Every path trapped. Unless she created her own. Grace turned to Ada. I need a lawyer. Ada nodded immediately. I know someone. Grace took a deep breath. For the first time, I'm not fighting for our marriage. She looked back at Daniel's building one last time. I'm fighting for my life. Inside Okafor Holdings, Daniel stood at his office window. His phone rested in his hand. A blinking notification appeared on the tracking app. Grace's phone signal had briefly turned on. Then Daniel's chest tightened. She's still in Lagos, he whispered. Behind him, Vanessa stepped forward. Good. He turned. Vanessa's eyes were cold, calculating. Because it's time we ended this. Daniel hesitated. What do you mean? Vanessa stepped closer, her voice calm. If she refuses to disappear willingly. She let the sentence hang. Daniel felt unease creep into his chest. Vanessa finished it quietly. Then she disappears another way. Daniel said nothing. But for the first time, he began to realize something terrifying. He wasn't the one in control. Vanessa was. Outside, Grace stood in the fading sunlight. She clutched the incorporation document tightly. Her hands no longer trembled. Her fear had begun transforming into something else. Something stronger, something dangerous. They tried to poison me, she whispered. Ada watched her carefully. Grace's eyes hardened. They tried to erase me. She lifted her chin slightly. They forgot one thing. Ada waited. Grace's voice became steady. I'm still alive. And now, she was ready to fight. The law office was quiet. Too quiet. Grace sat beside Ada in the waiting room, her fingers tightly clasped together. The ticking wall clock sounded louder than it should, each second stretching her anxiety further. Ada leaned closer. Her name is Barrister Ifunanya Okeke, she whispered. She's one of the best. Grace nodded faintly. Best. She needed the best. Because Daniel was no longer just her husband, he was her enemy. The receptionist finally stood. Barrister Okeke will see you now. Grace stood slowly, her legs weak but determined. They followed the receptionist down a narrow hallway lined with framed certificates and legal awards. The office door opened. A woman in her early 40s looked up from behind a polished wooden desk. Her sharp eyes studied Grace carefully. Then, her expression changed. Recognition. Grace? Grace froze. She hadn't expected that. Yes, Grace said cautiously. The lawyer stood slowly. It's really you. Grace frowned slightly. Have we met? The lawyer nodded once. Yes, she hesitated. I used to be Daniel's lawyer. Grace's heart skipped. Ada looked between them in shock. Barrister Ifunanya gestured for them to sit. Grace sat slowly, her pulse racing. I stopped working with him 2 years ago, Ifunanya said calmly. Grace swallowed. Why? The lawyer leaned back slightly. Because he asked me to do something illegal. Grace's stomach dropped. What? Ifunanya studied her face carefully. To remove your name from company ownership. The words hit like a physical blow. Grace's breath caught. He said it was for restructuring, Ifunanya continued, but the documents would have erased your legal claim completely. Ada gasped softly. Grace felt her chest tighten painfully. What did you do? Grace asked. I refused. Grace closed her eyes briefly. Relief, pain, validation, all at once. Ifunanya continued. He fired me the next day. Grace let out a shaky breath. He told me everything was fine. Ifunanya gave a bitter smile. Men like Daniel survive on appearances. Grace reached into her bag and pulled out the original incorporation document. She placed it gently on the desk. Ifunanya leaned forward. Her eyes widened slightly. You kept this? Grace nodded. Yes. Ifunanya looked up at her. This changes everything. Hope flickered inside Grace's chest. Ada leaned forward eagerly. What does it mean? Ifunanya spoke clearly. It means half that company legally belongs to Grace. Grace's heart pounded harder. Half. Not nothing. Not erased. Half. Ifunanya continued, and any transfer of ownership without her consent can be challenged in court. Grace thought of Vanessa, of Daniel signing everything behind her back. They transferred shares to Vanessa, Grace said quietly. Ifunanya's expression hardened. Without your signature? Yes, the lawyer nodded slowly. That's fraud. The word hung heavily in the air. Fraud. A crime. Proof Daniel had betrayed not just her heart, but the law. Ifunanya folded her hands. Grace, there's something else you should know. Grace tensed. What? The lawyer hesitated. Daniel came to see me again 3 weeks ago. Grace's pulse spiked. What did he want? Ifunanya's eyes held hers. He asked how to enforce a life insurance claim quickly. Grace felt her throat close. Ada whispered, Oh my God. Ifunanya continued quietly. He said his wife was unwell. Grace felt rage ignite deep inside her chest. Unwell. He was already preparing her death on paper. I refused to advise him, Ifunanya said firmly. Grace nodded slowly. Thank you. The lawyer leaned forward slightly. You're in danger, Grace. Grace didn't deny it. I know. Ifunanya spoke carefully. If Daniel and his partner are desperate enough, they won't stop easily. Grace's voice was calm now. I'm not running anymore. Ada looked at her, surprised by the strength in her tone. Ifunanya nodded slowly. Good. She opened a file drawer, pulled out a blank folder. If you want to fight him, we begin today. Grace's heart pounded. Fight, not survive. Fight. What do we do? Grace asked. Ifunanya's voice was steady. First, we file an injunction. Grace frowned, to stop him from selling or transferring any more company assets. Hope grew stronger inside her. And second, Ifunanya met her eyes. We expose the fraud. Grace thought of Daniel's face, his lies, his betrayal, his attempt to poison her, and Vanessa, the woman who thought she had already replaced her. Grace nodded slowly. Do it. Ifunanya gave a small approving nod. There's one more thing. Grace tensed again. What? The lawyer hesitated. Daniel wasn't always like this. Grace felt something twist painfully inside her. What do you mean? Ifunanya spoke carefully. His financial collapse began after Vanessa joined the company. Grace frowned. He told everyone she was an investor. Ifunanya shook her head slightly. I investigated her. Grace leaned forward. And, Ifunanya's voice lowered, Vanessa doesn't invest in companies. Silence filled the room. Grace's heart pounded louder. What does she do? Grace whispered. Ifunanya's eyes darkened. She takes them. Grace felt cold all over. Ada whispered, How? The lawyer answered quietly. She finds desperate men, gains control of their companies, and when they're no longer useful. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Grace understood. Daniel wasn't just betraying her. He was being used too. Grace sat back slowly, her emotions twisted together. Anger, pain, clarity. Vanessa hadn't just entered their lives randomly. She had targeted Daniel, targeted their company, targeted everything Grace had built, and Grace herself had become collateral damage. Ifunanya closed the folder firmly. Grace, if you do this, there's no going back. Grace didn't hesitate. There's nothing left to go back to. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. For the first time since that night, Grace wasn't the victim anymore. She was the threat. Daniel was halfway through a meeting when the knock came. Sharp, unexpected. He looked up, irritated. His staff rarely interrupted him without warning. Come in, he said coldly. The door opened slowly. A uniformed court officer stepped inside. Every conversation in the room died instantly. Daniel frowned. Yes? The officer stepped forward and held out a sealed envelope. Mr. Daniel Okafor? Daniel's chest tightened slightly. Yes, you've been served. The words echoed louder than they should have. A strange silence filled the office. Vanessa, seated beside him, stiffened. Daniel took the envelope slowly. His name was printed clearly across it. Legal stamp. Official. Final. His fingers felt heavier than usual as he tore it open. He unfolded the papers, his eyes scanned the first line, and froze. In the High Court of Lagos State, his heart began to pound. He kept reading. Petitioner Grace Okafor. His breath caught. Grace, his wife. Alive. Fighting. The words blurred slightly as his pulse thundered in his ears. Emergency injunction to freeze all ownership transfers and financial restructuring of Okafor Holdings pending investigation of fraudulent share transfer. Fraud. Daniel felt the room tilt. Vanessa stood suddenly. "Let me see that." He handed her the papers silently. Her eyes moved quickly. Her expression darkened with every second. "This is impossible," she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "She found a lawyer." Vanessa looked up sharply. "Who?" He shook his head. "I don't know." Vanessa slammed the papers onto the desk. Her calm mask cracked for the first time. "This cannot go to court." Daniel's voice was low. "It already has." The room felt smaller. Hotter. Dangerous. Vanessa stepped closer to him, her voice barely controlled. "You told me she had nothing." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She wasn't supposed to." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Yet here she is, freezing everything." Daniel's mind raced. Grace had never challenged him before. She had always trusted him, believed in him. But now, she was exposing him. Vanessa leaned in closer, her eyes sharp. "If this investigation continues, they'll uncover everything. Forgery. Insurance. Debt. Poison." Daniel's chest tightened painfully. He whispered, "What do we do?" Vanessa stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "We adapt." Her voice returned to its cold calm. She picked up the papers again. "She's challenging ownership." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." Vanessa smiled faintly. "But ownership battles take time." Daniel didn't understand. Vanessa continued. "And time can still be controlled." A chill ran down his spine. Across the city, Grace sat inside Barrister Ifananya's office, watching her phone carefully. She hadn't turned it fully back on, only long enough to receive confirmation. Ifananya stepped in. "It's done." Grace looked up. "He's been served." Grace exhaled slowly. A strange mixture of fear and relief filled her chest. For the first time, Daniel knew she wasn't helpless. Ada smiled slightly. "Good." Grace stared down at her hands. They still trembled slightly. Ifunanya sat across from her. "He will react." Grace nodded. "I know." "He may try to contact you." Grace's voice hardened. "I won't answer." Ifunanya studied her carefully. "You must also prepare yourself." Grace frowned. "For what?" The lawyer spoke gently but firmly. "Court cases expose everything." Grace understood. Their marriage, their finances, their secrets, their pain, everything would become public. Grace swallowed. "I'm ready." But even as she said it, a small part of her wondered if anyone could ever truly be ready for that. Her phone vibrated suddenly. Unknown number. Again, her heart skipped. Ada noticed. "Don't answer." Grace hesitated. The phone kept vibrating, then stopped. A message appeared. Grace stared at the screen. Her blood ran cold. Unknown number. "You should have stayed gone." Ada whispered. "Who is it?" Grace didn't answer. Another message appeared. "Court won't save you." Then, "You belong to this story now." Grace's hands trembled. "Vanessa." It had to be. Ifunanya spoke calmly. "This is intimidation." Grace looked up. "What do I do?" The lawyer's voice was firm. "You don't run." Grace nodded slowly. She was done running. Back at Okafor Holdings, Daniel sat alone in his office. The court papers lay in front of him. Grace's name stared back at him. He hadn't expected this version of her, not the quiet woman who supported him from the shadows. This Grace was fighting him. His phone buzzed. "Vanessa," he answered. Her voice was cold. "We need to meet tonight." Daniel hesitated. "For what?" Her answer came slowly. "To decide how far we're willing to go." The line went dead. Daniel stared at his reflection in the dark office window. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about money or the company. He was thinking about Grace, the woman who once loved him without question, and the terrifying truth, he might have created his own destruction. Across town, Grace stood at Ada's apartment window, watching the night settle over the city. She no longer felt like prey. She felt like something else, something awakening. Daniel had tried to erase her. Vanessa had tried to replace her. But now, they would both learn something dangerous. Grace Okafor was not as powerless as they believed, and she was just getting started. The city lights of Lagos glittered like shards of glass as Grace sat quietly in Ada's apartment. The rain had stopped, leaving streets glistening under the street lamps. Grace stared at her phone. The messages had stopped for now, but the threat still lingered. Ada walked over with a cup of tea. "You're not going to sleep tonight, are you?" Grace shook her head. "No, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Ada set the tea down and frowned. "You mean Vanessa?" Grace nodded. "She isn't just a mistress. She's dangerous." She's been controlling Daniel for months, probably manipulating people inside the police, inside the company, everything. Ada's eyes widened. The police? Grace took a deep breath. Yes, if she's smart, she's already making sure no one can protect me. Every official, every officer, she's probably influencing them quietly. That's how she works. That's why she got control of half the company so quickly. And she's planning the next move. Ada looked horrified. You're saying she could make us disappear? Grace's jaw tightened. Not disappear. But she could make it nearly impossible to fight legally if we're not careful. That's why I need Ifunanya to be smart. She has to anticipate Vanessa's moves. And we need leverage, something they can't ignore. Ada's gaze went sharp. Like what? Grace's eyes glinted. Evidence, records, anything Vanessa's done, emails, bank transfers, something she didn't think anyone would see. That's how you beat someone like her. Meanwhile, at Okafor Holdings, Daniel paced his office. His phone buzzed constantly. Vanessa's voice came through on the line. You need to act tonight, she said sharply. Grace has a lawyer now. She's already filing injunctions. If we don't move first, she'll take everything. Daniel exhaled harshly. I'm trying. Vanessa's tone softened just a fraction. You think I care what you're trying? I built this opportunity. I brought you the solution to your debt, and now your wife is a threat. You need to protect yourself, or the empire is gone. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had built an empire with Grace once. Now he realized he hadn't built it alone. He had let greed, fear, and Vanessa blind him. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Vanessa's voice turned deadly calm. Neutralize her. Daniel froze. The word echoed in his mind. Neutralize. You mean, he began. Yes, Vanessa interrupted. Legally or otherwise. Make her irrelevant. Make her powerless. You do this, and the company survives. You don't, and you fail. Daniel's hand trembled. He had never seen Vanessa like this. Controlled, calculating, cold. And for the first time, he realized she wasn't just his partner in business. She was his master now. Back with Grace, the room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Ifunanya Okeke entered, carrying a thick folder. I've started digging, she said. You were right. Vanessa is far more dangerous than we imagined. She's got allies everywhere, but I've found something she didn't expect. Grace leaned forward. What? The lawyer opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, financial transfers, and a strange pattern of company accounts. If Vanessa's goal was to control Daniel's company, Ifunanya said, she left her tracks, messy tracks, enough to tie her to illegal activity, fraud, coercion, and bribery. Grace felt a surge of hope. That's it. That's leverage. Ifunanya nodded. Exactly. But we have to move carefully. If Vanessa finds out we have this, she won't hesitate to destroy us. Grace's eyes narrowed. Let her try. She's never met someone who fights like I fight. Ada whispered, You're not scared? Grace shook her head. I've been afraid for too long. Now it's their turn. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his office staring at Vanessa's photo on his desk. She's turning against me, he muttered. I can feel it. Vanessa's influence was growing stronger than ever. Every decision he made, every move he tried, she controlled. And now Grace was not running anymore. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he realized he had created his own worst enemy. And that enemy was someone he had once trusted with everything. Night had fallen over Lagos, but Grace's mind was wide awake. The city lights reflected off her laptop screen as she studied the files Barrister Ifunanya had uncovered. Emails, bank transfers, insider accounts, all tying Vanessa to illegal manipulations, bribes, and secret ownership schemes. Ada leaned over her shoulder. Are you sure this is enough? Grace's fingers hovered over the keyboard. It has to. Her voice was calm but sharp. This is the first strike. Once Vanessa realizes we have this, everything changes. Ada swallowed nervously. What do we do first? Grace's eyes narrowed. We go public, carefully, legally, nothing reckless. Barrister Okeke will file a formal complaint with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. That's step one. Ada's eyes widened. The EFCC? Grace nodded. Yes, they can freeze assets, investigate transactions, and block further illegal moves. Vanessa's secret empire stops in its tracks if we do this right. Ada bit her lip. And Daniel? Grace paused. Her eyes hardened. He'll realize that all his empire depends on Vanessa, and she won't save him this time. Across town, Daniel sat in his office, phone in hand. His eyes were bloodshot. Vanessa was on the other line. Grace is not going to stay quiet, she said sharply. Daniel flinched. I can handle her, he said. Vanessa laughed, a chilling sound. You don't understand. She knows things you didn't even suspect, and she's smart. Smarter than both of us combined. If she moves first, the company is done. Everything you've built, gone. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we strike first. Vanessa's voice was calm, almost amused. You think you can strike her? She's already watching every move you make. She's been preparing while you panic. Daniel's hand shook slightly. Then we have to force her hand. Vanessa's smile was venomous. Do what you will, but remember, the first strike doesn't always go to the aggressor. Back in Ada's apartment, Grace's fingers typed out the final email. It was addressed to Barrister Okeke. Attached, all the evidence linking Vanessa to illegal company transfers, bribes, and manipulation of Daniel. The email subject line read, Urgent, evidence of fraud and coercion, immediate action required. Grace paused, her finger hovering over the send button. Ada whispered, Are you ready? Grace exhaled slowly. I've been ready my whole life. Send it. Click. The email was gone, and with it the first official strike had begun. Minutes later, chaos erupted on the other side of Lagos. Daniel's phone buzzed incessantly, calls from Vanessa, the accountant, and board members. Every message a question, every call a panic. Vanessa's face appeared on the video call, her eyes wide, uncharacteristically tense. What did you do? She demanded. Daniel's voice was sharp, purred. I don't know yet, Vanessa cut him off. She's filed the complaint, EFCC. They're freezing accounts. They have everything, every transfer, every illegal document, and they're moving fast. Daniel's stomach dropped. Impossible. How? Vanessa's voice was deadly calm. She's not just fighting, she's winning. Ifunanya Okeke is brilliant. She set the trap perfectly. Daniel sank into his chair. Sweat slicked his forehead. Vanessa's eyes met his. You trusted me to control everything, and now you're powerless. Daniel whispered, almost to himself, She's going to destroy us. Vanessa smirked. Not destroy, expose, and then it's up to you to survive. In Ada's apartment, Grace sat back in her chair. The first strike was complete. Her hands were steady now, her eyes glinted. Step 1, she murmured. Ada looked at her. And step 2? Grace smiled faintly, cold and determined. Step 2 is watching them crumble. Outside, the Lagos night pulsed quietly. But inside that small apartment, the storm had begun. Grace Okafor was no longer a victim. She was a force, and everyone who had betrayed her, Daniel, Vanessa, and their web of lies, was about to find out how dangerous she could be. The air inside Okafor Holdings was tense. The boardroom, usually a place of quiet authority for Daniel, felt like a battlefield. Every chair, every glass, every document seemed to weigh heavily with danger. Vanessa paced back and forth, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Daniel sat at the head of the table, staring blankly at his laptop screen, emails from the EFCC blinking ominously in his inbox. They've frozen the accounts, Vanessa said coldly, her eyes piercing Daniel. Every single transaction we made in the last 6 months is under review. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, sweat glistening on his brow. How did she get this so fast? Vanessa stopped pacing and looked directly at him. Because she's not just fighting, she's preparing. Every move we thought was hidden, she knew about it months ago. Every bribe, every secret transfer, it's all exposed. Daniel swallowed hard. We can't let her win. We have to do something. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Something? She repeated. You think we can fight the EFCC? Grace Okafor isn't just any opponent. She's cunning, meticulous, and dangerous in ways you don't understand. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. I built this empire. I can't. You didn't build it alone, Vanessa snapped, cutting him off. And right now, you're completely at her mercy. Every decision you make from here on will either save you or destroy you. And frankly, you've already shown weakness. Daniel's stomach churned. He felt exposed, cornered, and for the first time in years, powerless. Vanessa walked over to the large window overlooking the city. Her voice softened, but it was still icy. We have to act and fast. Step 1 is to discredit her. Daniel shook his head. Discredit her? How? She has lawyers, evidence. The EFCC. She's human, Vanessa interrupted. Humans have weaknesses. Everyone does. We find hers and exploit it. We manipulate perception, control the narrative, and if necessary... Daniel flinched. If necessary? Vanessa's eyes glinted. We remove obstacles, legally, financially, emotionally. We ensure she cannot threaten us again. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't like the thought. He realized Vanessa wasn't just his partner anymore. She had become the predator, and he was trapped in her strategy. Back in Ada's apartment, Grace sat quietly, reviewing documents with Barrister Ifunanya. Each email, each bank transfer, each proof of Vanessa's manipulation was a dagger in her mind. "This is stronger than I thought," Ifunanya said, pointing at an attachment. "These files show she orchestrated everything, even Daniel's moves in some cases. He's just a pawn." Grace's lips tightened. "Exactly. And now we have the upper hand. She won't see us coming until it's too late." Ada whispered, "Do you think Vanessa knows we're onto her?" Grace shook her head slightly. "She suspects something. That's why she's already manipulating Daniel, but she underestimates me." Ifunanya nodded. "We need to make the next move carefully. Any misstep, and she could try to intimidate the EFCC or even falsify documents against you." Grace's eyes hardened. "Let her try. She doesn't know who she's dealing with." Ada glanced at her, concern mixed with awe. "Grace, you're not the same person from 2 weeks ago. This is frightening." Grace smiled faintly. "Good. Let them be scared. They should be." Later that night, Vanessa sat in a dimly lit hotel suite, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes," she said to an unseen listener. "Everything is in place. Grace Okafor thinks she has control, but she doesn't understand what's coming. We'll destabilize her before she can even file the next motion. Daniel, he's fragile. Use that." She paused, listening intently. "No mistakes," she hissed. "We cannot fail." Her eyes flicked to a photo on the desk, Daniel smiling innocently in happier times, unaware of the storm he had invited into his life. Vanessa smiled. "And when this is over, she will wish she never came back." At Ada's apartment, Grace leaned back in her chair, staring at the city lights through the window. Her phone buzzed. An email alert. She opened it carefully. Inside were copies of recent EFCC filings. Her strike had landed. Accounts were frozen, transfers blocked. Vanessa's manipulation had begun to unravel publicly. Grace whispered softly, almost to herself, "This is only the beginning." Ada looked at her, eyes wide. "Do you think they know it's coming?" Grace shook her head. "They have no idea." And in that moment, the cold, calculated fury inside her crystallized. Grace Okafor was no longer running. Grace Okafor was preparing for war, and Vanessa and Daniel were about to feel the full force of her first counterattack. The following morning, Lagos woke under a bright sun, but Grace didn't see the light. Her mind was focused entirely on the storm she was about to unleash. Ada poured coffee, but Grace barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the documents in front of her. Emails, bank transfers, internal memos, all the proof of Vanessa's manipulation, her lies, her control over Daniel. Barrister Ifunanya sat across from her, studying the files carefully. "This is extensive," she said. "Vanessa underestimated you. She thinks you're still scared. That's her first mistake." Grace leaned forward. Her voice was calm, sharp, and dangerous. "She thinks she controls the narrative. She thinks she's untouchable, but she's sloppy. Everywhere she's left a trail, and we're going to follow it. Step 1, destabilize Daniel. Step 2, expose Vanessa publicly. Step 3. Ifunanya raised an eyebrow. "Step 3? Grace smiled faintly, coldly. "Step 3 is watch them destroy each other from the inside out." Ada shivered. "You really think this will work?" Grace's eyes glinted. "I don't think. I know." Across town, Daniel was pacing his office. The EFCC freeze had sent shockwaves through his company. Employees were whispering. Board members were panicking. Vanessa had been screaming orders all morning, but Daniel could sense her tension beneath the surface. His phone buzzed again. Another email. He opened it and froze. The email contained screenshots of internal company transfers, documents he hadn't seen since Vanessa orchestrated them months ago. And at the bottom of the email, a message. "You are exposed. Every move you make will be visible now. G.O." Daniel stared at the initials. Grace Okafor. He swallowed hard. For the first time in months, he felt fear. Real fear. Vanessa entered the office, her usual calm demeanor replaced something sharper, more dangerous. "Daniel," she said quietly, "they're watching everything. She's already ahead of us." Daniel's hands shook slightly. "What do we do?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "We trap her." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "Trap her? How?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "By making her think she's winning, by letting her move first, then we counterattack. It's what predators do." But her voice dropped. "We have to be careful. One wrong move and the entire empire collapses, including us." Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. Meanwhile, Grace was executing the first phase of her trap. She had scheduled a leak. Emails, financial transactions, and evidence of Vanessa's illegal manipulations sent anonymously to the board members of Okafor Holdings, several journalists, and a trusted EFCC contact. Grace watched the notifications on her laptop. Emails opened, replies flooding in, panic beginning to spread in real time. Ada whispered, "They're reacting." Grace's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "Exactly the way I want. Let them think they're controlling the situation when they're falling into it." Ifunanya leaned closer. "You've anticipated their every move?" Grace's eyes were icy. "I know Vanessa. I know Daniel. They trust themselves more than anyone else. That arrogance is their weakness. And now," she pressed a button, sending the final set of evidence. "Now we wait." Back at Okafor Holdings, Vanessa's phone buzzed. The emails had reached her first. Her perfectly controlled calm faltered. Screenshots of her secret deals, internal memos, and proof of bribery were flooding her inbox. Her jaw tightened. "How?" she hissed to Daniel. Daniel's face was pale. She planned this. She knew everything." Vanessa's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then it's time to counter." She leaned closer, her voice cold. "We hit back, immediately. We make her look like a criminal, like a liar. We take control of the narrative before she can. And we do it tonight." Daniel's chest tightened. He felt cornered, trapped between Vanessa's ruthlessness and Grace's sudden and terrifying rise. And across Lagos, in her small apartment, Grace sipped her coffee calmly. The trap was set. Vanessa thought she controlled Daniel. Daniel thought he controlled the empire. But Grace controlled them both. And for the first time since that poisoned wine, she felt completely free. The boardroom at Okafor Holdings was buzzing with tension. Employees whispered in corners. Phones vibrated constantly. Screens flashed with emails, all marked urgent. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, her face perfectly calm, but her eyes sharp, almost predatory. Daniel sat beside her, pale and trembling. Every message, every news alert, seemed to push him further into panic. Vanessa raised her hand for silence. The room went quiet instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and cold, "it has come to my attention that false allegations have been made against Okafor Holdings. These claims are baseless, malicious, and entirely fabricated by—" She glanced at Daniel, her lips curling faintly, "a former employee with personal grievances." She turned her gaze toward the staff. "I assure you, our operations remain stable. Any attempt to destabilize this company will fail. And as for those spreading these rumors—" Her eyes flicked toward Daniel, and he swallowed nervously. Across Lagos, in Ada's apartment, Grace watched the news live on her laptop. Vanessa's press release had already gone viral. Television, online portals, social media, all displaying Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative. Grace as the disgruntled ex-wife, spreading false accusations to ruin the company she claimed to have helped build. Ada gasped. "She's trying to make you look insane. This could backfire badly." Grace's hands were calm on the keyboard, her eyes narrowed. "Let her try. This is exactly what I wanted." Barrister Ifunanya leaned forward. "Explain." Grace's fingers moved quickly, sending a controlled leak of her own, emails, bank transfers, and internal memos from Vanessa's personal account proving the manipulations, bribes, and fraud Vanessa had orchestrated. She included messages from Daniel himself, revealing Vanessa's control over him. The laptop pinged as emails were delivered to the same journalists and board members Vanessa had targeted. Grace sat back, a cold smile forming. "They think they're hitting first," she murmured. "They just walked into the trap." Back at Okafor Holdings, Vanessa's phone buzzed repeatedly. Her calm mask cracked slightly as she scrolled through incoming emails. Screenshots of her manipulations, proof of bribery, and internal memos had begun circulating among the same people she had tried to influence. Daniel noticed her hands shaking slightly. "Vanessa, what's happening?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She pressed her phone to her ear. "We need to counteract, now." Daniel's voice was shaky. We can't. She's ahead." Vanessa's face paled slightly. For the first time, she realized Grace wasn't the scared, defenseless woman she had thought. Grace had anticipated every move, exploited every weakness, and now Vanessa herself was on the defensive. In Ada's apartment, Grace watched live updates roll in. Social media exploded. Employees and investors began questioning Vanessa's version of events. News channels picked up the leaked documents. Ifunanya said quietly, "She has no choice now. Vanessa can't recover from this publicly. She'll have to answer questions internally and legally. And Daniel, Grace's eyes hardened. Daniel is cornered. He'll have to choose, side with Vanessa and risk everything being exposed, or try to save himself by admitting the truth. Ada whispered, "Do you think he'll turn?" Grace smiled faintly, cold and dangerous. "He already has. And soon, he'll realize the full extent of his mistakes." Later that night, Daniel sat in his office, staring at the chaos unfolding across screens. Board members emailing him directly, journalists calling for statements. Social media erupting with Vanessa's fraud exposed. Vanessa slammed her phone down beside him. "This isn't over," she hissed. Daniel closed his eyes. "It's over, for us." Vanessa turned sharply. "Don't speak like that." Daniel's voice is quiet, firm. "Look at the evidence. She planned this. She knew what we'd do before we did it. Grace Okafor isn't just fighting back. She's controlling this entire situation." Vanessa's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible." Daniel shook his head. "No, she's alive. She's powerful. And right now, she's the one making the moves." Vanessa's jaw tightened. For the first time, she realized she might have underestimated the woman she thought she had already destroyed. And in that moment, across the city, Grace leaned back in her chair, watching the screens light up with Vanessa's unraveling. A single thought consumed her mind. This is only the beginning. Daniel sat alone in his office, the hum of the air conditioner doing nothing to cool the storm inside him. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa's name flashed across the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Daniel, what are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, laced with panic. He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know if we can recover from this." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "What do you mean? We can fix this. Control the narrative." Daniel cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "No, Vanessa, you controlled everything so far, and now she's ahead. She exposed you. The emails, the transfers, everything." Vanessa paused, realizing the magnitude of the situation. Her carefully built empire of manipulation was collapsing. "That's temporary," she hissed. "No," Daniel said, voice firm, almost shaking. "We trusted each other, and now I see you were using me all along. You weren't helping the company. You were using me. Using us." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger and fear crossing her face. "Don't try to turn this around on me. Grace is dangerous, yes, but if we act smart..." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Act smart, you've lost perspective. Look at the chaos outside your perfect little plan. Employees are leaving, journalists are calling, the EFCC is investigating. And me, I trusted you blindly. That ends tonight." Vanessa's voice dropped, sharp and cold. "You think you can go against me? Without me, the empire falls." Daniel shook his head. "No. Without her, we fall. Grace is controlling this, Vanessa. And if we don't adapt, everything we built, all of it, gone." Vanessa's composure cracked. She slammed her phone onto the desk, her perfectly maintained facade breaking for the first time. Daniel stood slowly, the weight of realization pressing down on him. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of Grace. He was afraid of the truth, and the woman he had once tried to destroy. Across town, Grace and Barrister Ifunanya were analyzing the latest responses from journalists and board members. Every reaction validated their strategy. Vanessa's influence was crumbling. Ada whispered, "They're reacting exactly how you wanted." Grace's eyes glinted, cold and sharp. "Yes. And Daniel is beginning to realize something else." Ifunanya raised an eyebrow. "What?" Grace leaned forward. "That his alliance with Vanessa isn't as solid as he thought. He's questioning her loyalty, and when the leader doubts the strategist..." Her lips curved faintly. Everything falls apart. Ada gasped softly, "You're terrifying." Grace shrugged, almost nonchalantly. "I'm just alive, and they underestimated me. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was thinking I would stay silent, and their third mistake," Grace's voice dropped, cold as steel. "Their third mistake is thinking they can manipulate me." Later that night, Daniel sat in the dark of his office, staring blankly at his reflection in the window. The city lights glittered like stars mocking him. Vanessa's last attempt to regain control had failed. Her emails to journalists went unanswered. Board members whispered behind closed doors. Employees questioned every order. And Daniel knew, deep in his chest, that the one person who had truly controlled this game from the beginning was Grace. Vanessa appeared at his side. Her voice was low, almost pleading. "We can still fix this, together." Daniel shook his head slowly, his eyes dark and resolute. No, Vanessa. Grace already has the upper hand, and if we keep trying to manipulate, we'll destroy ourselves. Vanessa's jaw tightened. For the first time, she realized she had lost control, not just over Daniel, but over the empire she had meticulously built through fear and deception. Daniel finally whispered, almost to himself, "We've been playing the wrong game from the start." Across Lagos, Grace leaned back in her chair, sipping tea calmly. The chaos she had orchestrated unfolded perfectly. Ada asked softly, "What happens next?" Grace's eyes gleamed with quiet fire. "Next, we watch the Empire collapse from the inside. Daniel is questioning Vanessa. Vanessa is losing her power, and the moment they turn on each other completely." Her smile was faint, dangerous. "That's when we strike the final blow." The storm had begun, and Grace Okafor was standing at the eye of it, calm, unshaken, and ready. The night was quiet over Lagos, but Daniel couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every move, every betrayal, and every misstep that had brought him to this point. Vanessa had gone home hours ago, furious and plotting, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his guilt. He picked up his phone, hesitated, and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. "Hello?" Grace's voice came through, cautious but calm. Daniel froze. "Daniel, what are you doing calling me?" He sighed heavily. I need to tell you something. You need to know what Vanessa is planning next." Ada, standing nearby, frowned. "Daniel, why now?" Grace's voice was steady. "I'm listening. Go on." Daniel's tone was low, almost fearful. "She's planning something drastic. The EFCC freeze, she thinks it's temporary. She believes we can manipulate the board and journalists back in our favor, but she's wrong." Grace narrowed her eyes. "Go on." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "She's going to try to force a legal trap, a counter-complaint, false accusations against you. If it works, she'll have you tied up in court while she rebuilds her control over the company. And me." Grace's pulse quickened. "And you're telling me this? Why?" Daniel hesitated, his voice shaking slightly. "Because I can't do it. I can't betray you. I've already let you down too many times. If she succeeds, you'll lose everything. I can't watch that happen." Grace leaned forward, her voice soft but deadly. "Daniel, why now? Why risk telling me?" His silence said more than words. Finally, he whispered, "Because I've realized she never truly trusted me. She only used me, and if I don't help you, she wins completely." Ada's eyes went wide. "Are you sure we can trust him?" Grace didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let his words sink in. Every move he had made, every betrayal, every hesitation, it all made sense now. Daniel was trapped, controlled by Vanessa, and he knew it. Grace's voice finally came, calm but sharp. "All right, Daniel, I'm listening. Tell me everything. And from now on, you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no second guessing. Do you understand?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yes, I understand." Grace smiled faintly, cold and precise. "Good. Then let's begin. Step 1. You give me everything Vanessa is planning for the next 72 hours. Every meeting, every call, every document she intends to use. I need it all." Daniel nodded quickly. I can do that. She trusts me completely. She won't suspect I'm telling you." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Good. Because the moment she realizes you've betrayed her, she'll come for both of us." And Daniel, his breath caught. "Yes?" "Make no mistake," Grace said quietly. "Dangerous. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about survival and revenge, and I intend to win." Daniel exhaled, a mix of fear and relief washing over him. I'll follow your lead." Grace hung up and turned to Ada, her eyes glinting with determination. "We have him. Finally, Daniel is on our side, but we must move carefully. Vanessa is ruthless. She will not surrender." Ada whispered, "Do you think he'll stay loyal?" Grace's smile was faint, deadly. "He has no choice, and right now, that's exactly what we need." The city outside glittered, oblivious to the storm brewing in its heart. Grace Okafor was no longer just fighting to survive. She was orchestrating a war. And Daniel, her former enemy, was now a weapon in her hands. The early morning light barely pierced the tinted windows of Vanessa's sleek Lagos penthouse. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each notification another reminder that chaos was spreading through Okafor Holdings. Vanessa slammed her hand on the glass table, the sound echoing sharply in the room. "Impossible!" she hissed. Daniel stood tensely behind her, watching her fury. His hands trembled slightly. "She's moving too fast," Vanessa continued, pacing. "Every move I thought was hidden, exposed. How is this happening?" Daniel swallowed, uneasy. I think Grace knows everything we tried to hide, every transfer, every bribe." Vanessa whirled on him, eyes blazing. You think? She spat. You're useless. You've been feeding her information. Daniel's mouth went dry. It wasn't intentional. I didn't want. Vanessa's laugh was cold, cruel. Not intentional? She stepped closer, her face inches from his. You've betrayed me. You've allowed her to gain the upper hand while I've been working tirelessly to secure our control. Do you understand what this means? Daniel nodded weakly, guilt written across his face. Yes, I understand. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Then we fix it. Immediately. She picked up her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with lethal precision. We strike first. Grace thinks she's untouchable. We're going to prove she's vulnerable. We're going to expose her personally, attack her credibility publicly, dismantle her support, and isolate her completely. Daniel swallowed hard. Vanessa, if we do that, she knows me. She knows what I know about you. She'll anticipate our every move. Vanessa's gaze sharpened. Then we adapt. We manipulate perception, plant false evidence, spread rumors, destabilize her allies, make her doubt herself. Fear is the most effective weapon. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized, with mounting horror, that Vanessa had fully embraced her ruthlessness. She wasn't just fighting to save the company, she was fighting to destroy Grace completely. And if he wasn't careful, he might get caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, across Lagos, Grace sat in Ada's apartment, calmly reviewing the intel Daniel had secretly provided. Each message, each plan, each confidential strategy Vanessa had concocted was laid out before her like a map. Every move she thinks is hidden, it's already ours, Grace said quietly, her eyes glinting with cold fire. Ada leaned over her shoulder. So we know what she's planning? Grace nodded. Yes. And now it's time for the next phase. We let her strike, but on our terms. We control the battlefield, Ada. Every board member, every journalist, every official who could act, they all play into our trap. Barrister Ifananya entered the room, her expression serious. Be careful. Vanessa is unpredictable. Once she realizes Daniel is compromised, she'll escalate immediately, any misstep. Grace smiled faintly. No missteps, only calculated moves. This is the moment she thinks she has power, and this is when we hit her hardest. Ada's eyes widened. Grace, you're not scared? Grace shook her head. Fear is a luxury I don't have. Survival is a strategy, and revenge is a plan. Back in the penthouse, Vanessa slammed her laptop shut. She leaned back, glaring at Daniel. We hit tonight. Everything must collapse by morning. Grace won't see it coming. Daniel's stomach twisted. He wanted to obey, to follow her instructions, but he couldn't ignore the truth. Grace was already ahead. She knows too much, he whispered. Every move we make, she knows it before we do. Vanessa's eyes were icy. Then we make her believe she knows more than she does, confuse her, frustrate her, and when she overreaches, we crush her. Daniel nodded reluctantly, his mind racing. He realized that every action Vanessa planned would only tighten the noose around their own necks, and that Grace was already several steps ahead. That night, Lagos slept, unaware of the war raging behind closed doors. Grace, in her small apartment, sipped tea calmly as notifications flooded her laptop. Vanessa's counterstrike had begun, but Grace had predicted every move. Every fake news story, every planted rumor, every attempt to discredit her, she had prepared. A faint smile crossed her lips. Let her come, she whispered to Ada. She's walking straight into the trap. Ada shivered. Do you think she'll realize it in time? Grace's eyes glinted. Vanessa doesn't get to decide that. We do. Outside, the city glittered under the night sky. But in the shadows of power and betrayal, a war had begun, one that would leave no one untouched. Grace Okafor wasn't just surviving anymore. She was orchestrating the destruction of those who had tried to erase her. And Vanessa and Daniel were about to learn that the hunter could become the hunted. Rain fell steadily over Lagos that night, the kind of rain that blurred headlights, drowned footsteps, and hid intentions. Inside her penthouse, Vanessa stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her phone rested in her hand, waiting. Tonight, she whispered to herself, everything changes. Behind her, Daniel sat silently on the leather couch, his heart pounding. He had already sent Grace every detail of Vanessa's plan, every journalist she intended to manipulate, every board member she planned to pressure, every false accusation she intended to file. Vanessa turned suddenly. The journalists will publish by midnight, she said. By morning, Grace will be finished. Her reputation will collapse. No one will trust her. Daniel forced himself to nod. And the board? Vanessa smirked. They'll turn against her once they believe she forged financial records. Power follows perception. Daniel's stomach twisted. He knew Grace was already waiting. Across the city, Grace sat calmly in Ada's apartment, the soft glow of her laptop reflecting in her eyes. Barrister Ifunanya stood beside her. It's beginning, she said quietly. Grace watched as the first online article appeared. Headline, Former wife of Okafor Holdings CEO accused of forging financial evidence. Ada gasped. She actually did it. Grace didn't react. She simply reached for her phone and dialed a number. Yes, Grace said calmly. Release everything. Within seconds, the counterattack began. Emails Vanessa had sent to journalists offering bribes, voice recordings of her threatening board members, documents proving she fabricated accusations against Grace. One by one, the truth flooded the same platforms Vanessa had tried to control. Ada's eyes widened. Grace, it's everywhere. Grace's lips curved slightly. She wanted a public war. Now she has one. Back in the penthouse, Vanessa's phone buzzed violently in her hand. Her confident smile faded as she read the notifications. What? She whispered. Her name was everywhere. Headline, Okafor Holdings executive accused of bribery and fraud. Leaked recordings reveal manipulation. Company leadership under investigation. Vanessa's hands began to shake. This isn't possible, she breathed. Daniel stood slowly, pretending shock. What happened? Vanessa's voice cracked for the first time. She knew. She knew everything. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a board member. She answered quickly. Hello. The voice on the other end was cold. Vanessa, effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation. Her heart stopped. You can't do that, she said sharply. We already have, the voice replied, and the authorities have been notified. The call ended. Vanessa stood frozen. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. Across Lagos, Grace watched the headlines multiply. Her breathing was steady, her posture calm. Ada covered her mouth. She's finished. Grace shook her head slowly. No, not yet. Vanessa is dangerous when cornered. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, she answered. It's done, he whispered. She knows someone betrayed her. She doesn't know it was me, but she's suspicious. She's angry. Grace's voice was calm. Stay quiet. Stay close to her. She'll make mistakes now. Daniel hesitated. Grace, what happens when this ends? Grace paused. Her eyes darkened. When this ends, she said quietly, everyone faces the truth. She hung up. Back in the penthouse, Vanessa stared at the city through the rain-covered glass. Her empire was cracking, her influence slipping. Her carefully constructed lies unraveling. She clenched her fists. This isn't over, she whispered. Behind her, Daniel watched silently, fear and guilt battling inside him. He knew the truth now. Grace wasn't just defending herself. She was dismantling everything. And tonight had proven one thing beyond doubt. Vanessa was no longer the one setting the traps. The Lagos morning was gray and heavy with tension. Rain had stopped, but the streets were slick, reflecting the city's restless energy. In the Okafor Holdings boardroom, chaos reigned. Board members whispered urgently, phones pressed to ears, and screens flashing with news updates. Vanessa, normally cold and commanding, sat rigidly at the head of the table, her face pale with fury and fear. The door burst open, and a uniformed officer entered, holding official documents. Vanessa Okafor? He asked. She stood immediately, her expression sharp, masking the panic inside. Yes, what is this? The officer handed her the papers. You are hereby suspended from Okafor Holdings and placed under investigation for financial misconduct and bribery. You are required to report to EFCC headquarters immediately for questioning. A stunned silence filled the room. Daniel's eyes flicked nervously between Vanessa and the officer. Vanessa's hands trembled as she read the papers. This is impossible. Someone must have forged these. Daniel swallowed hard. His mind raced. The truth was unbearable. He had told Grace everything. She had anticipated Vanessa's counterattack and used it against her. He watched Vanessa storm toward the elevator, slamming doors behind her. Her fury and panic were palpable. One of the board members muttered under their breath, "It's over." She underestimated Grace. Across town, Grace sat in Ada's apartment, sipping tea calmly. She had followed the newsfeed closely, watching Vanessa's empire unravel in real time. Step one worked perfectly, Grace said quietly, her eyes cold with satisfaction. Ada leaned forward, still in shock. She's gone. They actually suspended her. You did this. Grace shook her head slowly. Not me alone. Daniel helped. Without him, we wouldn't have had this leverage. But yes, Vanessa underestimated us. That's her first mistake, thinking she controlled everything. Barrister Ifunanya nodded. Authorities are moving quickly. Vanessa's assets are frozen, her communications are under investigation, and the board is distancing themselves. She's desperate now. Grace's eyes narrowed. Desperation makes people reckless. That's when we hit next. Step 2, make sure she cannot regroup. Ada swallowed nervously. Step 2? What's that? Grace's lips curved faintly, deadly. Step 2 is dismantling her support network. Every ally, every lawyer, every employee she used to manipulate. They all fall. And then the final move is Daniel. Back at the penthouse, Vanessa slammed the door of her car. Her mind raced furiously. They're lying. She hissed into the phone. This is a setup. Someone betrayed me, Daniel. Daniel's voice came from the passenger seat. It's over, Vanessa. Grace planned this. She's not just reacting. She's controlling everything. And she predicted every move you made. Vanessa whipped her head toward him. How could you? Daniel looked down, guilt and fear written across his face. I warned her. I gave her your plan. I didn't want to see you destroy her or me. Vanessa's eyes burned with rage. You're useless. You were supposed to be my ally. Daniel's voice was firm. I was your pawn. You never trusted me. I'm done being your pawn. Vanessa's hands shook. You'll regret this, Daniel. When Grace thinks she's won, she'll see there's a price to pay. Daniel's jaw tightened. The price is on you, not me. Across the city, Grace leaned back, her eyes on her laptop. Notifications from journalists and board members poured in. Statements confirming Vanessa's suspension, leaks exposing her manipulation, and emails proving her bribery were all now public. Ada whispered, She's finished, isn't she? Grace shook her head, her expression deadly serious. Not finished. Dangerous people are never finished. But she's weak now. Desperate, and desperation makes them reckless. That's when we take the final step. Ifunanya leaned forward. And Daniel? Grace's eyes glinted. Daniel is loyal now because he has to be. But he's also the key to the final move. Once Vanessa realizes she's lost him too, everything she built collapses. Vanessa sat alone in the EFCC waiting room, seething, her empire crumbling. Daniel watched from outside the office, his heart heavy but determined. And somewhere across Lagos, Grace sipped her tea calmly, knowing the storm had only just begun. But this time, the wind was on her side. The fall had begun, and no one could stop it. Vanessa's hands were trembling as she paced the small EFCC waiting room. Every minute dragged like an eternity. Her empire, meticulously built over years, was unraveling before her eyes. Impossible, she muttered, her voice low and sharp. It can't end like this. Daniel stood just outside, leaning against the wall. So he had followed the developments silently, watching Vanessa's fury consume her. Her carefully controlled demeanor was gone, replaced with panic and desperation. You always thought you were untouchable, Daniel said quietly. Vanessa spun toward him, eyes blazing. Untouchable? Daniel, I built everything. You are nothing without me. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, Vanessa, I'm done being your pawn. And Grace is in control now. She predicted every move you made, every lie you told, every trap you set, and you walked right into it. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You think you're free from this? You think she won't destroy everything? She doesn't have the power to ruin me. Daniel smiled faintly, cold. She already has. She has the EFCC, the board, the media, and now she has me. Vanessa's chest heaved as she tried to maintain control. You'll regret this. She doesn't know the price of crossing me. Daniel's voice was calm, resolute. I know exactly the price, and tonight, she decides who survives. Meanwhile, across Lagos, Grace reviewed the latest reports. Vanessa's suspension was making headlines. Board members were scrambling. Journalists were publishing detailed exposés of Vanessa's bribery, fraud, and manipulation. Ada glanced nervously at Grace. She's desperate now. What do we do? Grace leaned back, her gaze sharp. We let her make mistakes. That's all we need. Desperation is dangerous, Ada. People act recklessly when they think they have nothing to lose. Barrister Ifunanya interjected. And Daniel? He's with you now? Grace's eyes glinted. Yes, but he's also the key to the final move. Vanessa thinks she controls him. She doesn't realize he's already turned. And when she realizes... Grace paused, her smile faint but lethal. She'll have nowhere to run. Back at EFCC headquarters, Vanessa's lawyer arrived with urgent news. Vanessa, the board has formally confirmed your suspension. Several journalists have published all the evidence Grace Okafor leaked. The EFCC is already reviewing your assets, transactions, and communications. Vanessa's hands shook. I can't believe this. Everything I worked for, destroyed. Her lawyer's face was grim. You still have options, but you must act carefully. Any rash move could permanently ruin your reputation and potentially bring criminal charges. Vanessa's eyes burned with fury. I won't be defeated. I will make Grace regret this. I will win. Daniel, standing quietly in the hallway, listened to her vows. He realized, for the first time, how dangerous desperation could make her. But he also knew one truth. Grace had already outmaneuvered her at every turn. Later that night, Grace sat in her apartment, the city lights reflecting on her calm, focused face. Ada whispered, she's going to try something. Tonight, she can't just sit there. Grace sipped her tea slowly. Let her try. Vanessa doesn't understand. The moment she acts recklessly, she falls into our plan, and we are ready. Ifunanya nodded. Daniel's information was crucial. Without him, she might still have the advantage. Grace's lips curved faintly. Exactly. And now it's time for the final phase. Every move she thinks is secret, it's already anticipated. Every trap she sets will backfire. Every ally she relies on is already compromised. Ada shivered. So this is the end game? Grace's eyes darkened, cold and unwavering. Not the end yet, but the reckoning begins tonight, and by tomorrow, Vanessa will know the true cost of underestimating me. Vanessa sat alone in her office, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was calm but strained. Prepare everything. Tonight, we strike back. I will not be humiliated. I will not be defeated. Grace Okafor, she will pay for this. But even as she spoke, Daniel watched silently from the shadows, knowing every word, every plan, every lie she thought would save her was now a weapon in Grace's hands. The night was heavy. The city slept, unaware of the storm about to descend. Grace Okafor had not only survived, she had prepared for war, and Vanessa was about to pay the full price. The city of Lagos was quiet under a heavy, humid night sky, but inside Okafor Holdings and Vanessa's world, the storm had reached its peak. In a luxurious hotel suite, Vanessa sat surrounded by files, laptops, and phones. Every piece of information she could gather, every plan she could devise was being executed simultaneously. She was desperate, furious, and cornered. This ends tonight, she whispered to herself, eyes scanning her plans. Grace thinks she controls everything, but she doesn't. Behind her, Daniel stood silently, his face a mask of tension. You've been lying to yourself for months, Vanessa, Daniel said quietly. She's already won. You just haven't realized it yet. Vanessa whirled on him, eyes burning. What did you say? Daniel stepped closer, voice steady. I said, Grace is in control. Every move you plan tonight, every attempt to destroy her, is already anticipated. And your empire, it's crumbling because of your own arrogance. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You betrayed me. I didn't betray you, Daniel replied firmly. I just stopped being your pawn, and now you're going to see the consequences of your actions. Her hands shook with fury. I won't be humiliated. I will not fall. She will pay. Daniel's expression hardened. She already knows the cost of your betrayal, and tonight, you pay it. Across Lagos, in Ada's apartment, Grace sat calmly, her laptop open. Notifications flooded the screen, board members questioning Vanessa's credibility, journalists publishing leaked documents, EFCC confirming investigations into Vanessa's accounts. Ada whispered, barely containing her awe, It's working. She's panicking. Grace's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Not just panicking, she's trapped. Every move she makes will only tighten the noose. Ifunanya leaned forward, studying the screen. She won't give up easily. Vanessa is ruthless. You must anticipate her desperation. Grace's eyes glinted with cold precision. Exactly. Desperation is predictable, and every desperate person makes mistakes. Tonight, we don't fight her. We let her destroy herself. Ada shivered. And Daniel, are you sure he'll stay loyal? Grace's gaze was unwavering. He already has, and now he is the key to the final strike. Back in the hotel suite, Vanessa began executing her counterstrike. She sent emails to journalists attempting to discredit Grace, planted false stories, and made calls to board members to regain control. But every attempt was anticipated. Every move was already countered. Daniel watched silently as Vanessa's frustration grew. Every lie she planted was exposed almost immediately. Every story she tried to push was countered by Grace's evidence, leaked strategically to the same journalists and officials. Vanessa screamed in frustration, ripping papers from her desk. This is impossible. How is she ahead of me? She knows everything. Who told her? Daniel's eyes met hers. I did. And now you are finished. Her face turned pale, rage burned in her eyes, but for the first time she realized she had no options left. She had overplayed her hand, underestimated Grace, and now the consequences were unavoidable. In Ada's apartment, Grace leaned back, sipping her tea. The live news feed showed Vanessa's empire crumbling publicly. Social media was flooded with proof of her bribery, manipulation, and coercion. Board members had suspended her, authorities were investigating, and journalists were exposing her every move. Grace smiled faintly. This is the moment. Ada asked, voice trembling. The moment for what? Grace's eyes darkened. The moment Vanessa realizes she lost because she betrayed the wrong person. And Daniel, he's about to see which side he belongs to. Hours later, in the penthouse, Vanessa sat slumped against the wall, phone in hand, trying to salvage anything. Daniel stepped forward, firm and resolute. Vanessa, it's over. You chose to betray the woman who helped build the empire, manipulate me, and try to destroy everything we had. Grace, she saved what truly mattered. And now, you face the reckoning. Vanessa's voice was hoarse. I won't lose everything. Daniel's eyes were cold. You already have. And tonight, you realize the cost of underestimating Grace Okafor. Across Lagos, Grace closed her laptop. She rose, walking to the window, watching the city lights glimmer under the humid night sky. Ada whispered softly, "It's finally over." Grace turned, her eyes icy and sharp. "No, Ada, this isn't over. This is the beginning of the end. Vanessa will pay for every lie, every betrayal, every poisoned moment she thought she could control. And Daniel, he will finally understand the price of trust and betrayal." The storm had ended. The rain had stopped. But the fire Grace ignited was unstoppable. Vanessa's empire lay in ruins, and Grace Okafor stood at the center of it all, victorious, unbroken, and ready for the final chapter. The morning sun rose over Lagos, but its brightness could not pierce the storm that had consumed Vanessa's world. News channels were relentless. Headlines screamed across TV screens, social media feeds, and newspapers. Vanessa Okafor suspended amidst bribery allegations. EFCC investigates Okafor Holdings executive. Grace Okafor's evidence exposes Vanessa's empire of lies. Vanessa sat in her penthouse, phone in hand, her fingers trembling. Every call, every message, every notification reminded her of her failure. Board members were distancing themselves. Journalists demanded statements. Investors were calling to freeze their accounts. "This isn't happening," she whispered, clutching the papers in her lap. "It can't be real. I am untouchable. I built everything." Daniel watched from the doorway, his expression grim but steady. "You built nothing that matters," he said quietly. "You manipulated, lied, and betrayed everyone around you, and now the truth has caught up to you." Vanessa turned sharply. You'll regret this. Grace, she hasn't won yet." Daniel shook his head. "She already has. Everything you thought was safe destroyed. And you're exposed. Publicly, legally, financially, completely." Her eyes burned with fury. I can fight back. I will find a way." Daniel's voice was cold. "No, Vanessa, there is no way back. You overplayed your hand. You trusted no one, and now everyone knows your betrayal." Meanwhile, Grace watched the unfolding collapse from her apartment. Ada sat beside her, stunned by the scale of Vanessa's downfall. "It's incredible," Ada whispered. "Everything's crumbling. She has no one." Grace's eyes were icy. "Exactly. That's the power of betrayal. When you underestimate the person you tried to destroy, you leave yourself exposed." Ifunanya added, "Legally, she's finished. The EFCC has frozen her assets, the board has suspended her, and journalists have corroborated everything. Any move she makes now is desperation." Grace leaned back, calm, but with a deadly intensity. "Desperation is predictable, and predictable people make mistakes. Tonight, we will ensure she cannot recover, she cannot manipulate, she cannot lie her way back. This is the final collapse." Ada's voice trembled. "And Daniel, he's on your side completely now." Grace smiled faintly, her eyes glinting. "Yes, he sees clearly now. Loyalty is earned, and he knows who truly saved everything." Across the city, Vanessa frantically called lawyers, journalists, and former allies. Every attempt to spin her story was met with evidence she could not refute. Every bribe she tried to make, every lie she attempted to plant, was exposed and publicized almost instantly. Her empire was crumbling under her own hands. each desperate move pushing her further into ruin. Daniel watched silently, his mind clear for the first time in months. Vanessa had controlled him for too long, manipulated him, used him as a weapon, and now she faced the full consequences of her choices. That evening, Grace closed her laptop and stood by the window, looking out over the glittering Lagos skyline. The city thrummed with life, oblivious to the battle that had taken place behind closed doors. Ada whispered, "It's finally over." She's completely exposed. Grace's eyes were cold and unwavering. "It's over for her," she said. "But it's also a lesson. Trust is fragile. Betrayal is permanent, and anyone who underestimated me learned that the hard way." She turned, her gaze sweeping the room with authority and calm. "Daniel knows now, Vanessa knows now, and the world knows now. Grace Okafor is not someone to be betrayed, underestimated, or destroyed." Outside, the city lights glimmered. Inside, a storm had passed, but in its place, a new power had risen. Calm, calculated, and unbreakable. Vanessa's total collapse was complete, and Grace Okafor stood at the center of it all, victorious, unshaken, and finally free. Night had fallen over Lagos, but inside Grace Okafor's apartment, a calm, deadly anticipation filled the air. Every piece of Vanessa's empire had crumbled. Board members had abandoned her, the EFCC had frozen her assets and begun legal proceedings, journalists had exposed her lies, and Daniel, once her loyal pawn, had fully aligned with Grace. Yet Grace knew the final act was about to begin. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, retribution, and making sure Vanessa felt the full weight of her betrayal. Daniel sat across from Grace, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I've made my choice," he said quietly. "No more lies, no more manipulation. I'm with you." Grace's eyes glimmered. "Good, because tonight, Vanessa faces the consequences of every poisoned word, every betrayal, every lie she thought she could hide." Daniel swallowed. Are we going too far?" Grace's smile was faint, sharp as a blade. "No, Daniel, she went too far first, and she thought she could destroy me, ruin me, control everything. Tonight, we finish this." Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her penthouse, phone in hand, frantically trying to salvage what little control remained. "They can't do this," she whispered, staring at the news. "It's not fair. Grace, she's not supposed to win." Daniel's words from earlier echoed in her mind. Grace is in control. Her hands shook as she realized he had fully betrayed her. The one person she thought would protect her secrets, follow her commands, and manipulate the world on her behalf had aligned with her enemy. Across town, Grace watched the final pieces fall into place. She had coordinated with journalists, legal authorities, and even Daniel to ensure Vanessa's public and private ruin would be irreversible. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence had been strategically released. Ada whispered, It's perfect. She can't come back from this." Grace's eyes were icy. "No, she can't. Tonight, Vanessa learns the price of betrayal. Tonight, she faces not just exposure, but the consequences of every poisoned moment she tried to orchestrate." Later that night, Vanessa was summoned to the EFCC offices for questioning. Every step she took was shadowed by the weight of her crimes. Journalists were outside, cameras flashing. Board members refused to meet her. Daniel stayed back, silent but resolute. Grace followed the news feed, her calm expression betraying nothing. "They'll let her think she's powerful for a moment," she whispered. "But power without trust, without loyalty, is nothing, and Vanessa has lost both." Inside the EFCC office, Vanessa sat across from the investigators. Every question cut deeper than the last. Every document they placed on the table was proof of her lies, manipulation, and fraud. She tried to argue, to manipulate, to spin the story, but no one listened. The evidence was overwhelming, and deep inside, Vanessa knew the truth. Grace had orchestrated everything. Back in her apartment, Grace leaned back, sipping her tea. Notifications pinged relentlessly. News headlines, social media reactions, and real-time updates from Daniel. Ada whispered, "It's done. She's destroyed." Grace's eyes darkened, filled with icy satisfaction. Not destroyed, enlightened. Vanessa thought she could poison trust, destroy loyalty, manipulate love, but she learned the hard way. Trust is everything, betrayal is permanent, and she underestimated me. Daniel entered quietly. "She's finished." Grace smiled faintly. "Yes, and now, we move forward. The empire is safe, justice is served, and the woman who betrayed me has finally faced the consequences of her choices." Outside, Lagos glimmered under the night sky, unaware that a storm had passed, leaving only calm, clarity, and power. Grace Okafor had survived. Grace Okafor had risen, and Vanessa had finally met the reckoning she so desperately tried to avoid. Daniel, how could you? Grace's voice trembled, but her eyes were sharper than ever. You trusted the wrong person, Daniel whispered, guilt and fear written across his face. One sip of wine, one hidden betrayal, and everything changed. A marriage built on love and loyalty crumbled under lies, manipulation, and greed. Secrets were exposed, alliances shattered, and revenge became inevitable. Grace had survived. She had risen stronger, smarter, and more determined. Vanessa and Daniel had learned the hard way that trust is fragile, and betrayal leaves permanent scars. Now we want to hear from you. What lesson did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe for more dramatic, emotional, and thrilling stories.